Hello and welcome back to the rabbit descending down the hole. So now we are on to our next season, our first episode of the next season. This time we are going to look at Joseph, a very, very interesting character. Um, if you know anything about him, just to give a brief overview, he was the boy that was sold into slavery, and then he got out of slavery, became basically the Prince of Egypt. I mean, they've made so many, movies about this. But he is very interesting. But we're going to deep dive into it. We're going to look more into his character, the psychology of things, and how he felt about stuff. And I think you'll get something out of this. So sit back and enjoy. Get your popcorn ready. Here we go. So we're going to start when he was young. I call this the boy wrapped in a memory. Jacob didn't decide to just make a coat one day. He needed to do this. There was something more to it than just making the boy a coat. Think about it. He had 12 sons. Well, it began with the way that Rebecca he kind of treated him. There's like some shadows here that are going on. The way things Rebecca did, quiet in the dark, silent, kind of sneaky a little bit, He withdrew himself for a little bit into the tent, and he sorted the wall. He crushed the pigments, things of that nature. Brothers, they kind of, wonder what's going on over there, how people are. So, well, I heard he's doing something for Joseph. Why is he doing something for Joseph? Seriously, the kid gets everything, seriously. Well, there was something a little, I don't know. But envy, jealousy, all that stuff, that happens with families sometimes, especially when one seems to be getting a little bit more favor than somebody else. But, well, anyway, Jacob, he was choosing colors, and he's very specific about some of these colors. Crimson. Crimson is the color of a sacrifice, the cost of love, you could say. Indigo is the color of a covenant. This promise that Joseph would carry forward. Gold, of course, gold is a color of destiny and this future he saw in the boy's eyes. And you can go on and on. Purple is the color of royalty. We could keep going with the colors if you really wanted to, but the point of the story is that he takes his time to stitch this. He takes his time, much the way. Do you remember with Esau and Jacob, how Rebecca was kind of like behind the scenes manipulating things? Well, you could say that in the same way that's going on here. In a sense, Jacob is kind of doing that too, as he's, with this making of the thing, and he's putting it together, things like that. And you could see, in a sense, possibly, just thought, maybe he's trying to rectify some things in his life. There were some things that didn't go too well for Jacob, and maybe he's trying to account for that, trying to make up for that. He totally screwed over his brother. I'm sure Isaac kind of had some, there he goes again, type thing. So maybe, just maybe, he's trying to rectify some things later on in his life, So, you have Rebecca. She's kind of like, you could say that she balanced him out, but she was just as sneaky as he was. You think about what she did, So, he was essentially, this is what my thought is that it looks like he's just trying to make things right with at least one of the kids, Now, was it favoritism? Well, of course it was, you know. And he called him out, and he called him out, you know, this one morning, you know, he worked and he's working on this thing, and calls him to the tent, come here, you know, I got something for you, you know. And, you know, Reuben was there, and, you know, some of the other people were there, and look, look at this. Look at this beautiful coat I've made for you. The brothers looked at each other like, what? What? Why does he get this? Well, it was a thing of beauty, actually. I mean, you know, it's hard to define fashion and what, you know, but at the time, you know, this was a really beautiful coat. And, you know, Joseph was one at the time. I mean, you think about it, he didn't, at this point in time, he wasn't really necessarily a field worker per se, you know. His brothers more or less did that. But he was kind of like, you know, I guess you could say in charge of the house, but not really in charge of the house type thing, you know. And I think that kind of played into some of the stuff with his brothers and whatnot, you know. But what this coat was saying is that the son is chosen. I am choosing him over you guys. And that's kind of how they took it, you know. Now there's good and bad with that, you know. He's going to be a leader. He's going to. What do you mean he's going to lead us? You know. Well, anyway, that night Joseph sat, you know, by the campfire, as we do all the time. You know, and thought his brothers would admire it. If they would be like, "Oh yeah, you know." None of that. You know. Well, he had a dream, a very interesting dream, actually, that night about the sheaves, the wheat sheaves would bow down to him. The stars and the moon and whatnot, they're kind of like bending before him, which is, oh, that's kind of wild, isn't it? You know. And anyway, he shared it. He shared it. He probably shouldn't have shared it, but he did. And so now they're like, there's like this anger, there's jealousy. It's like, what do you mean we're gonna bow down? Are you trying to say we're gonna bow down? So they took it that way, and really, kind of, if you look at the nuances of this dream, it could be interpreted that way. It could be interpreted that there was something else going on. You know, like, you know. But whatever the case was, they didn't like it. Levi took great offense to this, you know. Who do you think you are? So, I guess you could say not everybody sees this dream as a blessing. I guess that's one way of putting it. I was trying to think of some words. It's a threat. It's a threat to the hierarchy that they kind of have going on. You know, they already have some issues with them. They really got some issues with them. And it's kind of scary what they do next. It's almost unfathomable what happens next. Stay tuned, and I'll tell you what happens next.